Hokey religions and ancient weapons. Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster at your side.
Welcome to Hokey Religion, the Star Wars podcast. This episode, we've got new books announced. Bob Iger talking about George Lucas, and maybe a trailer soon. This is Tyler.
Not on the show. This is Michael, by
No.
the way. No trailer on the show.
Why would we ever premiere something like that?
Why would we ever make a choice to make this show better?
Welcome to episode 103. It's a big number.
It is a big number. I'm proud of us.
That's pretty good.
As much as we try to not do it.
Right. So we missed an episode, which seems to be happening more and more as life is too busy, but we record these when we can.
Yep.
So too bad for anyone that was
Cares.
just waiting for a new episode.
Anyone that loves this,
My
go
mother.
go to therapy.
Yeah, so New York
I
City.
did like the thing our mutual friend of ours said the other day where it was like, yeah, when I was talking about the show. He said,
Yeah.
yeah, and they, eventually they devolve into dick jokes. Like it was a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, at some point.
You can't be telling me, Scott, I'm going to call you out. You can't be telling me that you will listen to the show for actual information and valid opinions. As much as we have.
I
that.
know some people that do listen to this for actual information, which is
Well,
a surprise.
it is a surprise. I know some people who listen to it for dick
with an H.
dick stories.
Take out your retainer. It's time to record the podcast.
Oh, yes. That's for my dick story.
So this past weekend, was it?
Do you have a calendar on that watch?
Nope. New York City Comic Con happened, yes, this past weekend. And there were quite a few books announced, and comic books, and many other things to come in the new year. Some things, hopefully, answering some questions we want around Kylo Ren. But a lot of it looks really exciting, actually. I was just looking at the list. I was just looking at the list really quick. So of course there's the Journey to Rise of Skywalker books, which are coming out. You've got the
Which we've talked about that before.
Right.
It seems kind of late, or at least with Last Jedi, they were doing this stuff a lot earlier. They dropped the
books.
the Journey to stuff when the trailer first came out in Celebration.
like announced that stuff
Yeah.
way back.
Not dropped it, but announced it.
Right.
Which was in
It's the stuff is releasing around the same time.
that was May.
It would
of that
have
year.
been at Celebration.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
May. That was May, right?
Right.
The one we were at.
And I mean it's still dropping around the same time, dropping in,
October.
November-ish time frame to
But
give
announced
you a little bit
Around
beforehand.
now instead of back then.
Some of the stuff, yeah, still being really dug into now, other
Yeah.
than just titles.
I wonder if that's because the creation process for all this stuff had to start later because of the whole script drama that happened.
Very possibly, yeah.
I wonder if, because it seemed like Ryan, not only did he finish his movie pretty quickly, but it seemed like he wrote it and
Right.
created Last Jedi.
And they had
fairly
all
quickly.
the supposed trouble with Trevorrow with his various drafts
for 9.
for 9. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, that could be it. Because, I think the
Episode 8 was a smooth process compared to
right.
9.
So, of course, we still have the whole Resistance Reborn novel coming out, the Force Collector novel coming out, young adult novel, and then, of course, the comic series Star Wars Allegiance, as well as the Rise of Skywalker, extended edition novel.
The novelization.
Yeah.
Allegiance sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is coming out the week that this episode comes out.
Well, yeah. So the
Not
Star Wars Allegiance comics, it's a 4-issue comic series. It's going to release like one a week in October.
Yeah.
The first one coming out the week of this podcast release.
Right.
It's about General Leia taking a team, including Rey and Rose, to Mon Cala to look for allies, while Finn and Poe are looking to replenish the Resistance supply of weapons.
Yeah.
So that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Going back to Mon Cala and getting involved with them makes me excited for episode 9.
Yeah. I assume we'll see some Mon Calamari ships.
I would hope so. Like if this is finally the film where we have like a real space battle,
Yeah.
you cannot have that without just, Mon Cala ships
Yeah.
just looking all weird and bubbly
Right.
with their weird, like bridges that connect them that they, get blown apart in the middle. Seems really unnecessary shipbuilding and structurally unsafe, but
I mean, not to mention, since their last Mon Cala ship was driven straight into the heart of
Right.
Bald Vampire Man.
You've got the Resistance Reborn novel coming out, which should be interesting. I don't know all that much about that one. I'm trying to remember. That's the biggest thing with that one is the cover. At least what people are talking about is the actual cover of the book, because the American cover is missing a character that happens to be on the Spanish cover. Which is Wedge.
Wedge.
Good old Wedge. You would know him from such things as
Star Wars.
No, he's obviously he's in the original trilogy, but then in the new trilogy, he's been in, or the new, I guess, canon stuff. He's been in the Aftermath series.
Yeah.
He
was he mentioned in Alphabet Squadron at all?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because in Aftermath, he course
was captured, right?
Well, he was he was still doing stuff with
right.
With he was kind of more of like a flight deck guy. He didn't really fly anymore.
Okay.
But in the books, of course, in the Aftermath series, he gets with Snap Wexley's mom, Nora Wexley. They're all together by the end of the books,
boy.
he and
Snap's new daddy.
yeah. So Nora and Wedge start a flight school, basically, with Snap being one of the first students.
Mm.
Of course, him going on to become
nepotism.
Him going on to become one of the, main. I guess what's that squadron? It's Black Squadron.
Well, Poe's squadron was Black Squadron.
Black Squadron. He's in Poe's squadron, is he not?
Who, Snap? Snap is, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Snap being one of the pilots at the end of
Force Awakens.
Bloodlines.
Oh.
When Leia asks for that group of pilots to basically start the Resistance.
Right.
Snap was one of those pilots as well. So it'll be interesting to, I guess, I don't know, bridge that gap of what has happened with Wedge.
Yeah.
From where we've seen him in the books till now.
Did you ever watch that documentary about the original?
The Pinewood one?
It was some of the original cast from A New Hope. And they talked about making A New Hope and that whole process. But anyway, and then what they're doing now. A lot of them go to, I forget if it was just A New Hope or they covered some of the other movies too, but a lot of these old actors go to conventions and stuff and sell autographs and pictures and all that stuff. But Dennis Lawson has never really come back into the fold, so to speak. He's never,
not really. Yeah.
He doesn't really like to deal with it. And I think I remember, I didn't go look this up, but I think I remember a rumor that he was asked to be a part of Force Awakens and turned it down.
Yeah, so there were rumors around that he said he didn't want to, or he didn't want to be a part of it.
Right.
But I think again, every piece of what I'm about to say is all like hearsay.
Yeah.
Allegedly. That was the original alleged thing, but then more recently it has been alleged that it's not that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't due to other commitments.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
Whether either one of those things is true at all, that he was even asked, or that he didn't want to do it.
Sounds like it worked out now for whatever reason. Yeah.
So the fact that his image is starting to be seen on products And even more recently, I think it was Rebel Force Radio said they got in touch with, I guess, a representative for Dennis Lawson. Again, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But that person, that
Representative.
contact representative said that he was going to be in 9.
Right.
So that will be interesting.
Yeah.
But given that Resistance Reborn, it takes place after Last Jedi, and it's, basically Leia's call for aid, so far has gone unanswered. And, they are basically going around through the galaxy seeking more leaders, including those who, in days gone by, helped the rebellion topple the Empire.
Yeah.
So basically, they're going back looking for friends that were part of the Alliance, the Rebel Alliance, looking for people to help the Resistance.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting if Wedge is one of those and why he is not or was not already involved.
Yeah. Maybe he retired after the
he
whole...
started that flight school thing. So I guess he wasn't technically, because there was no,
That was what, 25 years
and they
before?
disassembled the military.
Yeah.
For the New Republic.
So I imagine he's just been retired this whole time.
I guess so. You would think he would, maybe not. I guess a lot of people didn't jump up to help the Resistance.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You would have thought he would have been one that would have, given prior circumstances. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it'll be, since he's been in other media thus far, it'll be cool. 1, hopefully having him in this book, and then 2, if he's actually in the film as one of those that have joined the cause, responding to the call for aid. Seeing him actually fighting in an X-wing, that'd be pretty sick.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. If, like you said, there is a big space battle at the end, which it's kind of clear from the trailer there's something along those lines. Yeah, for him to be back in a fighter. And there's in
the whole plot rumors, there's the whole, basically what the Emperor did to Luke, bringing him on board and making him watch the space battle. That's part of the plot rumor for 9 as well, is Rey kind of running into the same issue of being with the Emperor and seeing the space battle and then having to battle the Emperor after that.
Yeah.
Other books include, trying to look here real quick. Trying to see, the Force Collector, which is, this guy that's collecting, he's a force sensitive individual that is collecting relics, collecting, items, things like that. It seems like it'll be good. It's a junior, like a junior adult novel or a young adult novel. It looks really interesting, but the biggest piece of news that I guess came out of Comic-Con for this is that the writer, his name is Kevin Shinnick, and he after turning in his first draft, he got a call from Lucasfilm telling him that he had inadvertently written a big segment of Episode 9 into his story and that he needed to rewrite it. Which is...
That's crazy. How does that happen completely separately?
Completely unbeknownst to him, because, they don't share any of those kinds of details with authors that are making books.
Right.
But given that he is writing a book about collecting relics...
Yeah.
And that in Episode 9 and the rumored plot stuff, there are relics such as there's that supposed dagger that C-3PO, that has writing on it that C-3PO can't understand, that has information, I guess, coordinates to, I think, the wayfinding device.
Okay.
And then the wayfinding device itself being a major plot point of Kylo having to find the wayfinding device.
Did we talk about the dagger last time?
Way back when we first talked about the plot, I think.
Okay.
So that's the whole thing with C-3PO, is the dagger has writing on it that C-3PO can't understand. Of all the languages he knows, he doesn't know this one.
Yeah.
And so that's supposedly that's the whole red-eyed C-3PO thing, is him being hacked by Babu Frick, the little tiny alien man,
to be able to
understand it.
Interesting.
So given that there's been multiple relics mentioned in the supposed plot for Episode 9, the fact that this guy just came up with a large chunk of, I guess, a plot point for Episode 9 in his book It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting if we ever find out which one it was, because I think one of the other big things he finds, of course, is Luke's lightsaber too. So I wonder if I don't know. I wonder if there's anything around that either. Because I think he's the one that found Luke's lightsaber. That ends
It
up
is
in Maz's
interesting.
hands.
All of these little tidbits dropped in Force Awakens, JJ now has the freedom to come back and
wrap 'em
kind
up.
of wrap those things up, like Knights of Ren, like the lightsaber, like
Unlike Lost.
well, he had many chances to come back.
Well,
and
he
wrap
left
that
it
up.
with Damon and,
Oh, I
Carlton,
guess
and,
so.
and they didn't follow up on most of those things.
Mom came home and everything was on fire. It was too late at that
Yeah.
point.
It's that scene from Community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coming back with the pizza.
Yep. So how's Lost go?
What?
No.
Yep.
Yeah. I imagine that's what that was like.
Locke is over there swinging his arm around on fire, separated from his body.
But that's mostly the journey to Journey to Rise of Skywalker. Force
Skywalker,
Awakens
yeah.
was the first one. I'm so many movies back. But now we've got basically beyond Rise of Skywalker books getting announced. We're starting to get hints of what the next section of Star Wars is going to be without there being planned movies so far.
A little bit, not a whole lot.
Not much. But stuff coming out in 2020. So, for example, of course, they announced that there's going to be the Rise of Skywalker novelizations,
Yep.
the expanded edition of novel version.
That comes out in December, though, right? Not in 2020.
Yeah, I think that's in December.
Yeah.
There's a Clone Wars anthology book, which is like a middle grade short story collection featuring tales from a bunch of different authors about basically from during the Clone Wars. And then Del Rey had the biggest announcements. As always, they're the ones putting out the really big, newer novels. But of course, there's the follow-up, the second in the series of the Alphabet Squadron Shadowfall, which will be the second one.
That's exciting.
Set in that, and I really enjoyed the first one.
And the biggest.
Well, first, no, that's fine. The biggest and my most exciting announcement that was to happen is that there is an entirely new Thrawn trilogy for the third time.
Right.
A
Yeah.
third Thrawn trilogy series has been announced, which just makes me so happy.
Yeah.
So it's a Thrawn trilogy
Prequel.
Yeah, it's
This is Thrawn in the Ascendancy.
yeah.
It's
So
part
right,
of the
so as of now,
Ascendancy.
it's just dubbed Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. But it's going to go back to Thrawn as a soldier in the Chiss Ascendancy and kind of explore the unknown regions.
I wonder if it'll be back when he was a navigator.
I
Oh.
wonder.
That would be interesting. I mean, that would be pretty. I'm sure it'll mention it at least.
So like we've gone back and rebooted how he got into the Empire.
Yeah.
We've gone past that into in the current trilogy that just wrapped up, we went back, rebooted how he got into the Empire, and then have kind of seen that through
Yeah.
for the most part. I still need to finish the third one, to be totally honest.
How far did you get in that? Like a third of the way?
About a third of the way through. I need to
Okay.
see. I because I've tried not to read anything about what happened in that book because I do really actually want to read it.
Yeah, I haven't.
But I want
heard
to
anything
know.
about it either.
I'm not sure, and I haven't seen anything anywhere that the stuff with the Grisks is or is not wrapped up. Because that's the most interesting thing to me is what happens with them. Because
I would say it's probably
a,
wrapped.
I would hope so because it's a whole big mess at the beginning of the book. But yeah, so it's going back to just basically the unknown regions and the Chiss Ascendancy, which is going to be completely outside of the Empire, and
Yep.
it'll be
Should probably put my mic next to my mouth when
Well,
I
you know.
speak.
it's a blank slate, I guess, at that point, because you don't have to talk about the Empire. You don't have to talk about Jedis or Sith and it'll be interesting too, because as we've seen with the Chiss in the current novels, that they are there are some that are force sensitive that are made into navigators. It seems to be more females have that ability than males.
But Thrawn
to
was one of
them-
the navigators, right?
But to them, it's not the Force. They don't refer to it as the Force. It's
Yeah.
like an ability of the Chiss, as far as they're concerned.
Right.
they call it second sight. And then some people have third sight, which is mentioned in the third book. So they have like second sight and third sight, and they haven't really gotten into exactly, as far as I've gotten into the book, they haven't specified exactly what third sight is. They've only referred to it.
It would be interesting to see if the Chiss put any kind of ideology around that force, their perception of the force.
That's what I was,
like everybody else.
That's kind of what I was
has
getting to,
done.
is I wonder, because you almost have a blank slate with the force too, where obviously you still have to stick within the confines of what the force is and not go nuts with it. But at the same time, you can basically refer to and use the force in like a completely different way.
Yeah, maybe they have a different type of connection to the force. Maybe they,
Right.
yeah, maybe it's less about how, well, yeah, I don't know, the legacy of the Jedi and Sith. Obviously, they're not going to have any of that.
Right. Like, yeah, they don't have any, I guess, frame of reference other than it just being something their people can do.
Right. But yeah, is there a religion around it? Is there,
right.
Are there rules around it? Is it just used in the military, you know?
So this may be the first thing I'm trying to think, other than, so, you know, obviously the whole trilogy from Ryan was announced. That's going to be like outside of anything we've known, type of situation. But this book series, which is supposed to come out sometime in 2020, I don't think they gave dates or anything. They just announced, I think the first one's supposed to come out mid 2020.
Okay,
like
so
summer,
June, July,
yeah,
like the other books were.
Yeah,
probably.
This is the first thing I can think of that is fully outside of and does not have to be in any way connected to anything.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because it's so far, it's back before all the stuff we have with Thrawn, and it's completely outside of the quote universe, you know, the galaxy that we deal in currently. So it's not even dealing in this galaxy. So unless it starts to get into the Chiss noticing the Empire being an issue or all that, which is why Thrawn was sent in the first place. I'm assuming
sure
that trilogy will wrap up with that sending of Thrawn out.
Yeah.
But at least in the beginning, it doesn't have to refer to or have any connection to anything.
Yeah.
Which will be nice.
It'd be interesting. Interesting to see also, depending on how far back they go, to see what kind of breadcrumbs they end up following to contact or be aware of the rest of the galaxy.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like what, I mean, I know Thrawn met Anakin during the Clone Wars.
Right.
So
this has to be further back than that, because this is going to be Thrawn as a soldier still before he's been.
And we don't
directed around. Yeah.
Have anything from before the Clone Wars, do we?
Not really.
I mean, we've got a little bit of Old Republic stuff, but
yeah, Thrawn was just on a mission for the Ascendancy to basically get a shield generator.
Yeah.
In the second Thrawn book, because they didn't have that technology, shield generators basically. So he was sent to retrieve a shield generator and take it back so they could deconstruct it and, you know, do whatever they want to do with it.
Yeah.
So I mean, that would obviously fall into him being a soldier in the Chiss Ascendancy still.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming, like you mentioned, it may go back even further, at least telling about him being either a navigator or whatever else he did.
And you know, say the series decides to go back even before Thrawn. It would be great to hear history of the Chiss and just the unknown regions in general. You're right. It's a really it's pregnant with possibility.
Well, it's just that thing that they, you know, we keep talking about what happens next. What do we get after this trilogy wraps up?
Yeah.
And even the books that are getting announced, most of them still have to do with these characters in this storyline. Like, at what point do we get the expanded universe type books that just have nothing to do with the main story?
I think you have to be careful with that. We've talked about this before.
Yeah, I mean, it's
you have to have
difficult.
You have to have something to keep it interesting,
right?
Some kind of that is somewhat familiar.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think, I mean, this is going to be before any of those other trilogies come out. Obviously, any of this new media,
right?
That's going to be supposedly completely separate.
And I mean, this
will be the first dipping the toe in the water, probably.
Right, and not to discount the Mandalorian either, because
But it's
It
still
does
in
not
this
have.
universe.
It does not. It is, but
It's
it does
still
not
in the
have
timeline
to,
that's affected by the Skywalker trilogy.
right. But it's in the Shattered Empire
effects.
era,
Yeah.
and it so far from what we've seen in The Mandalorian, it really doesn't have. It really does not have anything grounded in or to do with the Empire or the Jedi or the Republic or the Resistance or Rebels or anything.
But it's in the middle of the fallout
it's in the middle
of both
of it,
those things.
sure.
Yeah. Well, we've talked
But-
about this before. There's a difference between things that are, turning the camera, so to speak, on
Right.
all of the things that are going on away from the main storyline. But then this whole Thrawn trilogy, that's
completely outside
picking up
of.
the camera and taking it completely somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, but even like what we're gonna have with the Mandalorian, which seems to be in the same universe, in the same timeline, but just another story that's happening. We still don't
Yeah.
get a lot of those.
No, that's
We
true.
really don't.
Yeah, that's true.
Because even like the Force Collector, which sounds like a really cool thing, like he's the one that finds Luke's lightsaber, and there's whole stories about
Sure.
there's stuff with Maz and the lightsaber, and it is still very tightly tying to the storyline of the films.
Yeah.
So getting stuff like Thrawn and getting stuff like Mandalorian, there have not been a lot of things announced that are that fully diverted from
Yeah.
the main arc.
Right. And then,
which
the next
we do need. We need that.
and the next spin-off is going to be Kenobi, the Kenobi series. So that's
And then the
directly
Kenobi series
tied
is
to-
directly tied into, which is I'm not
That
you know,
doesn't take
I don't-
anything
I
away
don't-
from it.
I don't not want that kind of stuff.
Right.
It'll just be interesting to see at what point do we get into that series of at what point do we fall into the expanded universe where we're getting just books that have nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
And is that good? Because a lot of that turned out not to be so much. I mean, that's what.
Well, I think there still has to be a reason for a story to be told,
Yeah.
which I don't think the expanded universe had a ton of,
Other than to
to just have something.
keep
it
Star
seemed like.
Wars going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
a lot of good came out of the expanded universe, but a lot of really weird bad stuff.
I mean, Thrawn came out of the expanded universe.
Right.
And then the one of the other things is probably we'll see how we'll see if they actually give us any information. But this December coming out is a comic series called Rise of Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
Which is basically the storyline of, as it says, the Rise of Kylo Ren. So it'll be interesting to see right before if it's coming out in December, and since the movie comes out near the end of December, it'll be interesting to see how much information they give us about what happened with him and Snoke and Luke and everything before we get to Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. And I think that's the point of this book.
I hope so.
You know?
That's what I'm hoping, because even the one that came out, the Snoke one, the comic that came out, really ended up being more about Kylo Ren than anything. Seeming like mostly,
sort of, yeah.
It was mostly about just how Snoke
Their relationship
it was just an abusive parent.
Yeah, he was
just really physically slapping him around.
Yeah, he threw him off a cliff at one point,
right?
In the comic,
right. So just him being completely abusive to try to just constantly make him angry,
manipulate him,
yeah. And so even that didn't really give us too much extra into what the relationship. It just showed us what the relationship was like, but not how it formed.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Emperor's his method with Vader was more hands off, more like I still can't tell if, like, if you go back and read the Vader series, I still can't tell if the Emperor knew Vader would come out of certain challenges learning a specific thing and having a specific state of mind that he wanted him to have, or if he was just fine with whatever happened. And Vader was just another tool that he was still trying to figure out how to use.
Yeah, so like we see, like I said, but Snoke seemed to be just like an abusive parent. Like, I want you to do a thing and then slap you instead of just like hoping they listen. He would just.
Snoke had a goal in mind, and he was going to force Kylo to get to that.
Forcing him to get to that point.
Yeah,
by trying to just beat the anger into him, basically.
That's what it seemed like. And like what I'm saying with the Emperor, it was the other end of the spectrum where it seemed
Way
like
more passive aggressive.
yeah, exactly. He would just twist Vader and manipulate him and just
Yeah.
throw little things at him.
Well, it's just like the stuff he would do with Tarkin, like in the Tarkin novel. Like the whole thing is like,
His whole thing was getting the other person to arrive at what the Emperor wanted him to think, but on their own. That's what it seemed like.
kind of, and just doing stuff just to spite him, just to
Twist the knife
just to
a
twist
little
the
bit.
knife. Like,
Yeah.
I have 2 cupcakes. Here's just one, Tarkin. I'm gonna throw the other one away. And then Vader just like, what the shit?
Yeah, right.
But me, I'm the important one.
Yeah.
And just doing stuff like that, just to make Vader get pissed off at just little tiny things.
Maybe that was because he knew Anakin so well, and he knew that Anakin would rise up to try to
Maybe.
meet at whatever level the Emperor was operating at.
Right.
Whereas Kylo is just a whiny teenager
Kylo wants
and has to be shaped.
right. Well,
still.
he's seeking that affirmation, whereas Vader wasn't really looking for affirmation too much.
True.
He was just angry and upset and trying to get revenge on
And the
anything
Emperor
he
was
could.
trying to get that anger to.
Whereas Kylo just
come
wants to
out.
be loved because everyone has disappointed him as far as he's concerned.
and
And
Snoke
so
is just denying
Snoke's
him
beating
that.
him, but Kylo's still trying to please him
Yeah.
because all he wants is for, daddy to love him.
Right.
Um,
But I mean, yeah, there's that dynamic difference. But I think there's also Snoke just seems more forceful about his goals.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So
it is interesting.
that's what I'm hoping we get out of this comic, though, is how did that relationship even start? Like, we've seen how the relationship worked now.
Yeah.
We still don't know how it started.
Is it a comic series or is it a book?
Yeah, it's a comic series.
Okay.
It's hitting in December. And then after that is Empire Ascendant. It's an epilogue special that will conclude the current run of the Star Wars comic. So the current Star Wars series, the current main Star Wars series is ending, and then they're relaunching it with a new number 1 that will pick up after. It'll be between Empire and Return of the Jedi.
Nice.
Basically, the arcs being, it'll pick up exactly in the first issue will pick up when Luke's hand gets cut off, which they released some panels from that those pages, and then it'll follow like the whole thing with Chewie and Leia and Lando and the droids trying to get Han Solo freed from Jabba and all of that.
Nice.
And I think that's it. But there's so much stuff coming out. What was it I was saying? I was seeing somebody saying it on Twitter right before we
So,
started, where
Mandalorian, Allegiance.
Force
Allegiance?
Collector.
No, Allegiance comes out next week.
No, it's yeah. So
Force
Mandalorian,
Collector.
Force Collector, the video game, Jedi Fallen Order,
Yeah, right.
and Rise of Resistance. Rise
All
of the
comes
Resistance
out the same
all
week.
comes out in the same week,
Yeah.
which
So
is
they're turning it up now.
gonna be. I mean, that's
Turning up the
in
heat.
what is that? That's in exactly a month, right? Isn't it like the second week of November?
Yeah, November 12th is
Yeah.
I think Mandalorian.
Right. So that week.
Yeah.
I'll be playing Fallen Order for sure. Yeah, I can't wait for that to come out. The game because they released some more footage and stuff from that.
It does look really good.
And just everything they keep showing about it looks really, really good.
Yeah.
I mean, just to the point that after they showed the very first trailer or the very first gameplay, because they did that whole thing during E3 where they showed gameplay, and then like a week later, based off of comments people had mentioned off of it, they went ahead, they started making changes to like the way the lightsaber looks and the way other things work, just based off of comments from people. Like the lightsaber, didn't look right. The way the core of the lightsaber looked wrong, so they completely went through and recolored it.
Wow.
And did stuff, made changes based off of feedback, like within less than a month after the original gameplay footage came out.
Wow.
So they really seem. I mean, it's out of EA, but it's from Respawn. So
Yeah.
Respawn seems to be really. They're really banking on this doing well, and they probably
Right.
need it to do well.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see. One, EA put out a good Star Wars video game. It'll be interesting to see that it's finally a video game that's not a multiplayer game. It's fully first person. There is no multiplayer at all. I'm sure there's going to be microtransactions for skins of stuff, but that's purely cosmetic, right?
Right.
It'll be interesting to see what this turns into for the rest of Star Wars video games, because we don't have any other video games announced. The ones that had been announced have been canceled.
Yep.
And those were first player or a single player story type games.
Well, that's what I think this is. I think it's testing the
Can
waters
we-
of a different,
Is this
Direction.
profitable?
a good direction
Yeah.
Go
They're trying to
figure.
figure out if it's actually as profitable as microtransactions.
to make something that everybody wants.
Right. Yes. See, there's not the problem's not the want. The problem is, does it make as much money as cheesing, microtransaction out of people? Because that makes a shit ton of money, and you don't have to put out a good game. You could just make a ton of money off of a really shitty game with a ton of microtransactions.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, which is what's happening with FIFA currently. I don't know if you saw that. That's a whole mess.
Yeah.
The brand new FIFA came out, and it's like horrible. Like there's screens, like people have taken screenshots of it, and like little ads and stuff like in the crowd and in the background have like the old FIFA year number on them.
Wow.
Yeah, just like stuff they just repurposed
Wow.
stuff from old games and old FIFA versions and didn't even bother to update. It's just a copy and paste, and
Wow.
here's a new version. You have to buy all the stuff you want over again. Yeah, that's a whole mess.
Wow. Well, the other thing I wanted to talk about today was, so a little over a week ago, Bob Iger's biography came out.
The ride of a lifetime.
His autobiography. And in it, he mentions how George was
George?
involved. Yes.
How George?
How George.
It mentioned how George.
He talked about George.
He talked about how George.
How George was involved in the sequel trilogy
Yeah.
from the very beginning of the process to a little further into it.
It's rough.
It's really interesting.
It's interesting. It's rough to read because it's
George.
It's
It's
business, and it's George.
Oh, rough to read because it's a business.
Yeah, I mean,
biography.
it's
A CEO's
no,
biography.
just like the stuff that's happened with George and that's mentioned here. Like it's
Oh, okay.
a lot of fans got upset over it, and you'll see why.
Well, yeah.
But
So
I understand, and if you know anything about us, I think we've mostly agreed with what Disney has done.
yeah, but this is why it was so interesting to me. So the first thing that Bob mentions is obviously George had ideas for the sequel trilogy.
He had completed outlines for 3 whole movies.
We've
I mean,
talked
we
about
knew
that
We knew about that
a long
long
time
before
ago, yeah.
Disney was even involved in
Right.
this.
Right. And we talked about it on the show and stuff before. So Disney offered, or Bob and a few other people that were involved. George brought it up that he had outlines written, so he sent them to 3 people, Bob and 2 others, Alan Horn being one of them, who was
at that point
involved
the new head of the Walt Disney Studio.
right. So they read it, and then Alan Horn decided, okay, we need to buy these. And in that process, Bob said that he made it clear to George that they had no predisposition to use.
They would not be contractually obligated to adhere to the plot lines
Right.
laid out.
Right.
Yeah.
So Bob felt that he'd make that clear. They obviously gave George some level of creative authority over the new sequel trilogy that they were talking about at this point. I think they made it clear that, their decisions were going to be their decisions about the direction for things,
Mhm.
but that,
They wanted him to be a
they wanted to be
consult.
involved. Right.
Yeah, they wanted him to be available as a consultant.
And George being George, of course, is asking for full control, or, at some level, I'm sure he expected to have some sort of control.
Yeah.
And that was something he had to give up.
But again, he felt like he made it clear that they would be under no obligation to follow his consultation.
Right. Right. I mean, and as Bob's talking about this, he's talking about it from a place of respect. He is
Right.
not, like, this is George Lucas you're talking to,
Right.
and you're telling that we're not necessarily going to use George Lucas's ideas. I mean, that's a really hard thing
Right.
to
Yeah.
say.
Exactly.
But, it was made somewhat clear. And then, cut to a little while later when Michael Arndt and JJ had a script for Force Awakens,
Mhm.
and they came and put it in front of George, and George read it.
Kathy, JJ, and Michael Arndt all go to the ranch, the Skywalker Ranch, to meet with George.
And start describing about where they want to take this. And George gets upset that this is apparently deviating.
That's not what he submitted
Right.
to them, basically.
Right. So here you have George Lucas, who not only has sold his ideas to Disney, but also been told that, these ideas aren't necessarily going to make it. And now he's getting upset that his ideas aren't being used. On the other hand, you have George Lucas, who has shepherded this whole, almost single-handedly, this whole Star Wars thing, for so long.
And Bob
being told
basically,
that his ideas aren't going to be used.
And Bob basically said he probably, in hindsight, he probably could have prepared everyone for the meeting more so. Because they had all discussed where the direction was going to go, and he thought he had been careful enough to not mislead George in any way.
Yeah.
But he thinks that maybe he didn't prepare JJ and Michael all that much for George might not take
might
this
have
well.
a problem, right? Yeah. So can you imagine walking into a meeting with George Lucas, all excited to share your ideas about where Star Wars
But
can
George
go?
hasn't been prepped for the fact that you're not going to be following his,
Right.
what outline he's probably had for 20, 30. I mean,
Right.
who knows how long,
Right.
years.
And so you're just, that's just a situation that's set up to fail, you know?
That's rough.
It is rough. But I don't know. That's just so interesting to me because we've talked about the ideas that George has had or the rumors.
Mhm.
We haven't seen any of his outlines, so we don't know for sure. But it was rumored that he wanted to take the sequel trilogy in a really weird direction, like
Star Wars LSD.
delving deep into the literal midichlorian side of the Force.
Yeah, like getting biological and microscopic with it.
I don't know what that means. I don't know how that could work at all. But it still somehow it had that in it, but then also still had all the main character type stuff. There was it's like a two different worlds kind of thing. I don't know how. So one of the critiques he had for Force Awakens, George had for Force Awakens, was that it was boring, that nothing new was.
Yeah, he said there's nothing new.
There was nothing new about it, which I think is an extremely valid criticism of Force Awakens.
That was most people's criticisms, I think, of Force Awakens.
Yeah. So again, I think it's very valid. I think though, in hindsight, it was the right decision.
I mean, that's what we've always said. That's what I've always said. It's like it was a rehash because I think it needed to be.
Yeah, well, when we talked about it, when Force Awakens first came out at the very beginning of the show,
it was so familiar.
Yeah, it felt familiar to the point of it felt like home. It felt like you were coming back to a universe that you'd been away from for a while.
Right.
Which was great. Which is that I think it's exactly what it needed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we both agreed that it was what was needed for the trilogy, but it would have been nice to see some new stuff, some weird directions, which I think Last Jedi succeeded so well in.
Right.
It defied all those conventions
and
while still sticking to the things that matter.
And one of George's other criticisms were that, of course, being George, there weren't enough visual or technical leaps forward, which
right.
I mean, where do you even go at this point with technical and visual?
Oh, I don't know.
Leaps?
Avatar 3D. I don't know.
4D. That's where you start, having smells pumped into the theater.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, yes, obviously George was like the father of a lot of how our visual effects got to where they are today.
Yeah, all digital cinema. He was a huge proponent of that and really pushed that forward.
Even the stuff in the original trilogy, just the
trilogy.
The visual effects and stuff he did with miniatures and just the models and stuff like that.
Some of that,
and the way he used them, I think, was
I don't know. I
a
think
leap compared to a lot of stuff from that time too.
somewhat. I think I think he used the technology he had access to very well
Right.
with the original trilogy. But there was the special edition and all the edits made afterwards. He has said on record many times
Mhm.
he wished he had certain things that he
Right.
just wasn't able to do,
There was just visual stuff he just couldn't do at the time.
which is why
2 is
special
completely a
edition.
blue screen. Or why the sequel, or I guess
the prequel
trilogy was
Yeah.
completely shot on blue screen, basically.
all digital. He went the other
Because
way.
everything was a technical leap forward. Like the stuff he did with that was beyond what filmmakers were doing at the time.
Sure.
Of course, we look back on it now and it looks old because
It
it
looks
is,
bad.
and it does. Some of it does look very bad. But
So I guess that's what I'm saying.
if
about
he hadn't
Force
done any of that, it
Awakens.
wouldn't have pushed visual effects in the direction I think they went as soon as they did.
Yeah, maybe.
Because he did make. I mean, that was a technical feat
Yeah.
that he did with those films because people weren't doing that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's fair. But I think
I don't know what
think that's
technical
the
leaps you
reason-
make in
Right.
2017 or whatever.
I think that's the reason Force Awakens had such a right feeling, was because they went back to
A little bit.
the familiar practical effects and all of that kind of stuff. JJ was very faithful.
I mean,
about
Bob
that.
says that when George said there weren't enough visual or technical leaps forward, it just goes on. He wasn't wrong, but he also wasn't appreciating the pressure we were under to give ardent fans a film that felt quintessentially Star Wars.
Sure. Right.
We
I think
intentionally
that's fair.
created a world that was visually and tonally connected to the earlier films,
Yeah.
not to stray too far from what people loved. And he was criticizing us for the very thing we were trying to do.
Right.
Looking back with the perspective of several years and a few more Star Wars films, I believe JJ achieved the near impossible, creating a bridge between what had been and what's to come.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think again there could have been a few things Force Awakens could have strayed from. It didn't have to feel like the beats of the story didn't
Right.
literally have to be the beats of
Exactly,
New Hope.
yeah.
You know, like it. I think they could have strayed a little bit from that, but it was the perfect opening, I think. And then again, followed by The Last Jedi, I think was the right direction to shift from that, to defy some conventions, to push it forward into where it needed to go.
Right.
And then obviously we'll see how 9 ends
I mean,
up.
that's been the trouble we've had with the sequel trilogy all along, is everyone, even down to Mark Hamill, has had this notion of what they think.
These expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've had 40 years or whatever, to decide
It's hard. Yeah.
what's going to be the story going forward.
Right.
Either fans that have saw the original films or even saw the prequel films, to George, to Mark Hamill, to everyone that's been involved.
Yeah.
They've all had so much time to basically decide where the story went
Yeah.
in their own head. And then,
So
here
to
comes,
meet
here
those
comes Disney.
expectations of
You
all
can't
these
meet those
people.
expectations, and
Exactly.
Disney does what they can.
Yeah.
And I feel has done a good job with it.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be able to make everyone happy when you've had that much time to make up your own story and
Yeah.
believe it.
Yeah. I'm speaking of Last Jedi, which I mean, again, I keep coming back to Last Jedi was, I do not understand the criticism of Last Jedi. I
Well,
truly
it's-
don't.
Well, it's all
It's
bullshit arguments, anyways.
It's somewhat, or arguments that don't really understand the movie itself. You know,
Maybe.
like they just don't understand how it fits. Yes, there are problems with the movie. Sure, there are problems. Like I said, there's problems with Force Awakens too.
Problems with the prequel trilogy.
A lot of
There's-
problems.
Yeah.
These movies aren't going to be without problems, but as a
Right.
whole, The Last Jedi was great and exactly what the trilogy needed.
Yeah.
But one of the other things Bob discussed was, and we've discussed, or no, we haven't discussed this piece, but the idea of Luke being in exile, that originated from George's outline. So all
Right.
these
Yeah.
complaints that people have of like, this isn't my Luke, even from Mark himself. Like, this isn't my Luke.
Yeah. Because like Pablo Hidalgo has mentioned some of this stuff and gone into it. Like ideas that were birthed from Lucas were the main character being a female Jedi,
Yeah.
there being a Jedi killer, Luke being in exile,
Yeah.
and how Lucas's episode 7 would have featured Luke being in exile. Like
Yeah.
that was
Right.
part of his thing.
Right.
It actually would have seen Luke return from his exile in 7 instead of 8. They pushed that idea to 8.
Yeah.
Um,
Which again, I think seeing how 8 ended up and how that's going to go into 9, I think was the right decision.
right.
The flow of that story I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think so.
Disney has been very faithful and very careful with this, and I think has done, like you said, a good job.
Yeah.
So far, anyway.
I mean, just the line Bob saying if Kathy J.J. Allen and I had discussed the direction in which the saga should go, and we all agreed that it wasn't what George had outlined.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the time or thought that they actually put into those conversations, because they had to, they had to have all those meetings up front of like, okay, what do we do with this thing that is as big as the company we already own?
Yeah.
As global as the company we already are a part of,
Sure.
as Disney. And it's, you have to have these conversations. That'd be such an interesting conversation to like hear about, like where do you even start with that? You get Kathy, JJ, Michael Arndt, and Bob Iger in a room, and you all just like, all right, we own Star Wars now, so
What are we gonna do? Yeah, right.
now what?
Right.
We have these crazy things from George about metachlorians and going microscopic,
And the
you have-
wills and
and you have pieces that they
Yeah.
have to pull out of that. But I can't imagine what a job.
What a task. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do you do that?
Right.
Which is it's crazy.
And yeah, and for all the small criticisms I have for JJ, I think bringing him back for 9 is the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, he gets to wrap up the ideas that because I mean, as much as he was the director of 7, he was way more than just the director of 7.
He was also the first person to touch Star Wars in 30 years. or 40
Right. I mean,
years.
he was brought in before. He was brought in as more than just a director to
Yeah.
help them try to sort out what to do with Star Wars.
Being
really.
the person to help write the script for 7, he was coming up with these beats for
Yeah.
for the sequel trilogy. He was one of the architects for all of that. So yeah, to bring him back for 9, hopefully he doesn't screw it up.
Right.
Hopefully he doesn't over JJ it, and it's just another kind of not a
Maybe.
surfacey type movie, in the way that Last Jedi felt deep. Force Awakens feels very surfacey.
JJ is an interesting director. I feel like he makes, like he can make a lot of different types of movies. But I think he makes the movie
potentially.
He makes the movie that needs to be made, not necessarily the movie you were expecting.
So you're saying
feel
he's like a chameleon director?
I don't know. It's just because obviously he can do, like think of Cloverfield and think of Super 8 and think of and then think of Star Trek.
Yeah.
And like, he makes the movie that it needs to be for the movie that you're making.
I guess that is.
I don't feel like JJ himself necessarily has a JJ style. Like it's not. Oh God, I can't even blanking on his name.
It's not a Scorsese.
It's not a Scorsese or who made the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right. That's exactly where
Tarantino. Oh
yeah,
my
it's
God.
not like you see a movie that Tarantino made and
It's
know
a Tarantino
instantly
movie, right.
that
Or
is a
Coen-
Tarantino
or the Coen
movie
brothers
or a Coen
movie.
Brothers movie.
These kind of
right?
signature directors, or
Like-
even like a Rian Johnson. Like what you're gonna get for the most part from a Rian Johnson movie. You're gonna get a pretty involved, or like Christopher Nolan, or
Right. They have they have a visual style. They have a storytelling style. Like there's
Yes.
very specific, and I don't feel like
But
JJ
that's what
necessarily has that.
No, I think his style is kind of the summer surfacey blockbuster type movie. That's his style.
Sometimes.
I think always. I mean,
I
unless I'm
wouldn't
forgetting
say,
about
I wouldn't say surfacey.
surfacey in the sense of there isn't really a deep quality to it. You know what I mean
I
by
wouldn't say
that?
Cloverfield would be surfacey.
He's very good at world building. I'll
Right.
say that.
Right.
But not necessarily intimate storytelling,
Maybe.
character driven stuff, maybe. would be a better way to put it.
That's possible.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of another director that's like that. I want to say Michael Bay, but
No, that
that's like the worst version of that.
or
I think it's a valid comparison, though. Actually,
possibly.
in that, in how Michael Bay is brought in to get a specific type of movie, you know,
Yeah,
JJ's similar, but just better movies overall.
but actual movies.
Right. It's different. So all I'm saying with that is I hope 9 isn't more of that. You know?
I guess so.
Like this isn't really the world building type movie that's needed here. This is wrapping up a very intimate personal story for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it is funny. You think of J.J. Abrams as, I don't know. He is definitely more a producer than a director. He's not directed as much as I
maybe
think he's directed.
Maybe that's why.
I was just looking at his credits. He directed Mission Impossible 3.
Okay.
He didn't actually direct Cloverfield. He was just a producer on that.
Did he write it?
No. I remember it was his idea.
Okay.
Because I remember he created the whole Cloverfield idea. I remember that.
Yeah.
I really got into Cloverfield and like the history of it.
Yeah. The world of it. Yeah.
The world of it. And I remember he had the idea for Cloverfield, but he didn't direct it. So he did Mission Impossible 3, Star Trek, Super 8, Star Trek Into Darkness, Force Awakens, and now Rise of Skywalker.
Interesting.
He's only actually directed since 1982, like 6 films.
Credited as a director, yeah.
Credited as a director for 6 films.
Yeah.
He's done television, of course. He did Alias and Lost and Felicity, and he was a writer on Fringe. He didn't direct Fringe.
Okay.
He directed an episode of The Office. So obviously he did a bunch of giant TV shows, and he's directed
I guess that makes
6
sense
big
then.
films, but he's produced a shit ton of stuff.
I guess that
otherwise.
makes sense. He's the guy that comes in with the big idea.
Yeah, he's mainly a producer. I mean, that's what Bad Robot's his production company.
Right.
He produces more stuff than he actually directs.
Huh.
So he is the
I guess
idea
that-
guy. So of the stuff he's actually
Yeah.
directed,
Guess that
I mean,
makes
Mission
sense.
Impossible 3 was pretty good.
Yeah.
The first Star Trek, I wouldn't say was necessarily bad.
Yeah.
I
think it
love
was pretty
Super
good.
8.
Yeah.
Star Trek Into Darkness, that one.
I think everything
That's a film.
after that first Star Trek reboot movie was really bad.
Right.
I have not seen a good one after that.
No. Into Darkness
Was that the one with Khan?
that was a rough mess. No, Into Darkness is the one with
With Idris Elba as the bad guy?
I think
Where
so.
they crashed the Enterprise? Was it that one?
No, Into Darkness is the one with Khan, isn't it? What was the last one?
The last one was the one with Idris Elba.
Beyond. That's what it was.
Where they
Star Trek
crash-
Beyond was bad.
Yeah,
It was real bad.
It was bad. I really did not like that one.
No.
The whole thing with Khan too, that movie was like it didn't have to be Khan. It could have been any character.
Right.
The way that
really
movie
could've.
went.
And I mean, if you think about it, he's been a producer on all of the Star Wars films too. I mean, technically, he has still been a producer on all of the Star Wars on the trilogy films. He was an executive producer on Last Jedi.
Well, yeah, because
Because it's still
still
basically-
kind
it's
of
still his
steering
idea,
this trilogy
really.
a little bit. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I forget how much he doesn't actually direct.
Well, so he was credited as a producer on Last Jedi, but we
An
all
executive producer, not a
yeah, well,
direct.
that's what I was gonna
producer,
say.
right.
Like we all know, knowing how that was made, it was mostly Ryan.
Right.
A large majority of it.
Yeah, an executive producer is like calling the guy that owns the McDonald's the manager. It's he really doesn't do anything.
I mean, technically, he manages it in the sense that it's there because of him.
When I worked fast food, the guy that owned that location would show up whenever he felt like it.
and like pat everybody on the
Would
back.
pat everyone on
and-
the back, take some food,
Yeah, right.
and then bother you during lunch rush,
Right.
asking you questions
Yeah.
about stuff,
Yeah,
and then would just go to the office
yeah.
with
And
a
sit there
stack of
until around
envelopes and then leave.
3:30
Right.
and then leave. Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't actually do anything.
That's like the district
He's
guy
just
that comes
there.
in.
Yeah.
Right.
So is that how it worked for you too?
Or
Is that how
like
it
he'll
was?
come in, yeah, he'll do that, and then part of the day too, he'll come in and like try to act like he knows how to do your job.
Oh yeah,
and like try
he's
to
like,
make
yeah,
some
I'll do
burgers.
this for a minute, and then
Yeah.
you watch them, you're like, everything you're doing is wrong and bad, and it's gonna be my
Right.
fault when you leave.
Right, exactly.
My actual manager's gonna come around and be like, why was all this stuff messed up? And I'm
Like
like, it was Terry.
He'll throw on a headset and try to do drive-through and just be like the worst person. to
Yeah, and then
drive
you've got a
through.
line around the building because you only got through 2 cars in the amount you would do 10.
And then he'll hand off the headset to
I'm
you.
like, all right, here you go, and then everyone's angry. Yeah. So it wasn't just
No.
my
No.
fast food experience that
That's how
was
it worked
like
for me too. Yeah.
Okay, just I was wondering how personal that experience was, but apparently that's exactly how all fast food jobs work.
That's how all owners and
Interesting.
district managers are.
Mine was Terry. Who was yours?
I don't remember.
You don't
his
remember?
name. I don't remember their names now. It's on purpose.
Oh, Terry,
Terry.
ruining my day every time you showed up.
I remember exactly what all these people look like, but I don't
Yeah.
remember their names now.
Oh God.
All right. Well,
Last thing, which is not big, is they have announced another Star Wars film that's going to be made.
yes. Nothing
Which-
about it though.
Nope.
Oh, you know what we forgot to mention? I mean, you kind of alluded to it a little bit. Was Project Luminous?
Oh, for the books.
That's what I thought you were going to go to when you were
Oh.
talking about 2020 stuff. But there's this thing that has been teased for a long time now.
Since Celebration, or maybe even before.
Yeah, that has like
Project Luminous. There's a bunch of
Kevin, what's his name, is attached to it. Claudia Gray,
Charles Soule.
Delilah.
Maybe
is
I know
Delilah-
Charles Soule
Charles Soule's part of it.
part of it, which he's been writing all kinds of books recently. For
I can't
Star
remember
Wars.
if Delilah is attached to it.
And
or
so
not.
it's this Project Luminous or Luminous, Project
Luminous.
Luminous. That's all we have is this Project Luminous name, and they keep saying more's coming, and they keep saying, stick around at the beginning of next year to find out more. Now,
Yeah, and
they
the-
still didn't say anything other than that at New York City Comic Con.
So Claudia Gray, Justina Ireland, Daniel Jose Older, who wrote Last Shot. Did he write Last Shot?
I think that was him.
Kevin Scott and Charles Soule. So not Kevin. What's his
So all
name?
these big authors that have been working on Star Wars books are part of some project that's supposed to take place next year, and this may be exactly what I was talking about, which I don't know why I didn't go to this when I was thinking about that. It's like, okay, so when do we get that next group of books that's not involved with
Yeah.
the trilogies?
Yeah.
This may be it. This may
Maybe.
be the next step of Star Wars and what comes next.
Maybe. So the tagline that they announced
Oh,
for
yeah.
it was the explanation of the Force. The Force is what gives a Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. ... Until ...
Project Luminous. So the
that
force
until-
the force is what we've known it to be until Project Luminous.
Yeah.
Which that until is very ominous.
Yeah.
So do we get into the Metachlorians and the stuff that George had outlined now in books after the fact and get into the Force more?
I don't know.
It'll be interesting coming out of this movie what we see of the Force, and then what I guess the possibilities could be going forward with it.
Yeah, this site is that I'm reading this off of is saying that the until part is part of Ben's original quote about the Force, but I don't know if that's right.
Don't know if that's true. But yeah, so there is this big. I keep forgetting about it because there's no information. There's some project of basically the next. We don't have a journey to movie, for movies anymore. For groups of books, there's going to be some new pathway, some new roadmap for Star Wars books. That is some Project Luminous that we have no clue about.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if anything with those starts leaking, because it's been teased for so long and literally no information has leaked or come out at all.
Yeah.
Which is tough to do nowadays.
Right.
Because even merch for the Rise of Skywalker was, photos were leaked of merch before it was even announced, like the posters and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting.
Very interesting.
So
anyway,
we got off track, starting with a new film was announced, and other than the fact that they're planning to make one, but Kathleen Kennedy said, they're pursuing a new era in Star Wars storytelling with Kevin Feige of Marvel.
Yeah.
So knowing what a diehard fan Kevin is, it made sense for these two extraordinary producers to work on a Star Wars film together. That's what Alan Horn was saying to The Hollywood Reporter. So Kevin Feige, huge fan of Star Wars. Obviously, he's basically been at the helm of the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got these two giant film producers, Kathleen Kennedy and Kevin Feige, are going to be making plans for a wave of projects set in the universe.
Interesting.
So I wonder. That is interesting to bring Kevin Feige in, because Kathleen Kennedy is, Lucasfilm president and producer.
Yeah.
She's been producer on Star Wars so far. And then, Kevin Feige is the Marvel Studios chief. Basically since, Lucasfilm's Marvel's not its own thing off of, I guess it is. He's just the studios chief. So like basically what Kathleen is for Lucasfilm.
But he's been the one who's kind of guided Marvel's rebirth.
The whole
in
MCU
pop culture.
thing. He's basically driven all of that.
Yeah.
And
but I mean the popularity of Marvel in pop culture now, I think he is a huge part of that because of the MCU. Yeah.
Yeah, so apparently Feige had discussed a foray into the Star Wars universe in a summer meeting with Kathleen Kennedy, Alan Horn, and Alan Bergman. And he said, Alan Horn said, we're excited about the projects Kathy and the Lucasfilm team are working on, not only in terms of Star Wars, but also Indiana Jones and reaching into other parts of the company, including Children of Blood and Bone. That's that new Lucasfilm movie coming out. And then with the close of the Skywalker saga, Kathy is pursuing a new era in Star Wars storytelling, and knowing what a diehard fan Kevin is, it made sense for these two to work together.
It's interesting.
I wonder. So, not necessarily. It's not necessarily that he's developing, and I should say he's developing a new movie. So I don't know what involvement he'll have past that, being a producer on it.
Yeah,
it's interesting because he's had. I wonder if, and this is where what comes next. He's had such a long history now with Marvel and planning what comes next for. You've got these huge stories, these huge characters, these huge arcs.
Yeah.
And he very handily made them all connect. For the most part.
Not single-handedly.
Well, not single-handedly, but he guided.
Played a large role.
He played a lead role in guiding just this this giant. It's like a flood of films that actually interconnected and made sense. Yeah, for the most part. And I wonder if
it's that Marvel formula that was in
which
every
I don't
movie.
want for Star Wars.
Right, we've talked about that before.
But I wonder if that's why they're bringing him in. It's like, okay, we finished the thing that we knew about.
Yeah.
What do we do with it now? And I wonder if that's where, like, okay, Kevin, you've been able to take things and guide them into continuing to make sense.
Well, you know what it seems like to me, a very CEO way of thinking about things. Like, oh, you got this great guy over here who's been making me a lot of money, and you got this great girl over here, and she's been doing great. You two get together and make us a bunch more money.
Very possibly.
Like, that's what it sounds like to me.
And I mean, and it could just be the fact that they've been making plans for things here and there, right? You've got plans for Rian Johnson's trilogy. You've got plans for the Game of Thrones guys' movies, because I can't care to remember their names.
D.B. Weiss and
Bob Jr.
Fuck boy. I don't know.
I don't remember his name.
Bob Jr.
Yeah. Dave Hoffman. I don't know what his name is. So you've got like, they're basically making deals with different people. Like, all right, you're going to do some movies for us. All right, you're going to do some stuff for us.
Yeah.
All right, we've got TV shows and stuff we got to make now too.
Now they have to make it all connect.
Wait a minute. We need to actually plan out how are all of these things going to be made and release and make sense together.
Yeah, but
it seems like a much larger project than, and
I don't know.
Not saying that Kathleen can't handle it, but obviously Kevin has had he's had a proven history of, like, yeah, I've worked with having 30 projects underway at the same time and making it all happen.
Maybe.
I wonder how much it's that, or does he actually have like an idea for a Star Wars story and came to
more
them?
of a purposeful, specific.
Yeah, I
side
wonder
of
if he
thing.
came to them because he's a fan, if he had an idea for something to do.
I don't know, maybe.
And that coming, or if it's more like, we need help on where the films are going. And
I'd say
how
Lucasfilm has
to-
been doing an excellent job so far at managing all these plate spinning.
Yeah.
Because all the media that has come out of Lucasfilm since the acquisition has been all connected.
For the you have the hiccups of Solo and the hiccups
Well,
of like
that's not a fault of storytelling and project management necessarily.
there's definitely been some marketing. I think there was definitely some marketing issues with Solo. I mean, there were a lot of issues. Obviously, they had just a bunch of trouble in general.
The production issues.
The production itself was the problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what comes of this, because it could be any number of things. Either him having an actual idea of a story to produce, or him coming in to be like, all right, you guys are going to be having a lot more stuff coming than the storyline that you were working on, and here's what we can do to make it smooth.
Maybe. I'm sure, like you said, he does have a lot of experience with that. I'm sure that's a part of it.
And it's a lot of unconnected stuff coming now, right? It's
not as far as we know.
As far as we know so far, there's a lot of
I'm
just
sure
like
there's some type
unconnected
of
movies,
arc.
and I wonder if that's what this is. Is like, all right, we need a new arc, or maybe he has the new arc, or their ideas for the new arc.
Yeah,
and especially because JJ made his production deal with, was it Universal?
I don't remember. No.
Bad Robot made because JJ was basically
some exclusive. Yeah,
JJ seemed to be the Kevin Feige of the current sequel trilogy,
somewhat
for the most part. And Bad Robot just made
that's
some
over
deal.
now. Yeah, I mean, whether he was or not, that's over now.
Well, right. But he signed a deal with with Warner.
Warner, okay.
He made a $250 million deal. Jesus.
$250 million? That seems low.
So J.J. Abrams and his production company, Bad Robot Productions, have signed a deal with AT&T owned Warner Media. The deal is reportedly worth $250 million. The partnership means that Bad Robot will produce original series and films for Warner Media and its various divisions, including HBO and Warner Brothers Pictures.
Interesting.
It also marks the first time that Bad Robot's video games and digital divisions will operate under one roof. So
do you think that means the DC stuff too? You think he'll start getting involved with DC?
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Movies and properties?
Maybe get that on track. Make that all make sense.
Take that away from Zack Snyder, please.
That would.
I'm sure he has been kind of removed from that at this point.
I wonder. So I wonder if, because that deal was made in the middle of him working on The Rise of Skywalker. I mean, that happened. This happened back in September. Or this story was back in September, earlier 7 September. That happened.
Well, he's still working on Rise of Skywalker.
And he's still working on Rise of Skywalker, and he's been a producer on that. But like, they don't have a Star Wars producer anymore either. I didn't think about that until just now when I'm talking about it. Whereas JJ has been the
Kathleen would.
She's the president. She's the president and executive producer on them.
You don't think she would be a direct producer on this stuff?
Does she have time to, with Indiana Jones and Star
Wars
and everything else?
The Rick McCallum of this era, I think.
I mean, yes, but she's always the executive producer.
I mean, Rick McCallum's job was to enable George to do whatever the hell he wanted to do, and he did that very well, I thought. And I think Kathleen's job is to enable her.
Yeah, but she's in charge of more than just she's in charge of more than just Star Wars too, though. Right, she's a president of Lucasfilm, so she has to. She's a producer on all of it and has to sign off on stuff and correct things when they're wrong, like stuff with Solo. But she is not beholden to just Star Wars.
I guess that's true.
So whereas JJ was like,
there's a lot of Lucasfilm stuff going on that isn't Star Wars right now.
Not yet, which is I think
there is a new Indiana Jones film in the
Indiana
works.
Jones, and then that Blood and Bone film that's coming out is going to be happening as well.
Come on.
Well, So I wonder.
That's what everyone.
Obviously, you
thinking,
had
but not
Kathleen, and then you
saying.
had JJ being a producer and executive producer, and someone that's not Kathleen, that's not in charge of other Lucasfilm stuff being
Yeah.
involved. I wonder if that's maybe going to be Kevin's role, or now too, to be more of a producer on some stuff alongside Kathleen. But Marvel's not stopping either, so he's still got that to deal with.
Yeah.
Which is it is nuts to me that you've got the person running Lucasfilm and the guy running all of these Marvel movies, which they've already announced like another 12 films or whatever that they're working on. Not to mention the TV shows that are coming out on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So you've got both these people that have way too much shit going on, working together to produce another Star Wars thing.
Another huge pile of shit for
That's just
something that's even more important than the stuff.
That makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, why would you bring in a guy that's already too busy to help the person that is already too busy? Like, hey, I'm too buszy and you're too busy. Can you come help me do another thing
And
to
get
make
even
us
more
both
busy?
to make both of us even more busy than we already are? That'd be great. Thanks.
Right.
That doesn't. It's weird. It just Kevin Feige as a person to get involved at this point doesn't make sense because it's not like he doesn't have anything going on.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know.
I mean, he's got WandaVision coming out.
What more do you need to say?
I can't not say that name without spite. Just laced with frustration. WandaVision. Because that's the best television show name to ever be written down. Someone wrote it down and was like, yeah, it's good. WandaVision. Sure. She's Wanda, he's Vision. Whatever.
Not since
It's a
$6
TV
Million
show.
Man have we not been told a story just through the title of a TV show.
Well, it's like a show about watching Wanda and Vision. So, like, let's just call it WandaVision because it's like you're watching them. It's like that's how I think of that name every time.
That's what I'm saying. You don't even need to watch the show.
No. It's just the name's the only important part.
There's a $6 Million Man in the show. So let's call it $6 Million Man.
It's like if it's like if Sports Center was called Sports View. Like you're going there to watch sports. That's right. That's at least it's a center for sports. Like, fine. It's a show and it's a center for sports, but it's like the Sports View. And then you just go and you view sports at Sports View. So now we just come to WandaVision.
So it's like if Lost was called Can't Find Them. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's too on the nose.
You don't think Lost is too on the nose? They're lost. That's the show.
But it doesn't describe what I'm doing.
Okay.
That's my problem.
Okay.
Is it doesn't describe
get it.
it doesn't involve me.
Okay.
Whereas WandaVision involves
The
me.
title
because-
requires something
Yeah.
from you. Okay.
So I'm gonna go watch Sports View. Yes, I'm viewing sports. Great. Now I'm
Okay.
My vision and my vision is on Wanda.
I understand.
I feel like if obviously Star Wars is very on the nose. It's Wars in the Stars, but it's I don't know what you would call that. Space Watchums. That's where it irks me. I don't want to be involved in the names of my television shows.
Okay.
That's it. That's all. That's my rant.
Watch me.
That's the new streaming service.
Watch me.
Just make a streaming service and call it Watch Me.
I was listening to a podcast the other day where Mitch Hurwitz was talking about how his new streaming platform is going to be all ads, no content. Because content is passe now. So you have one tier that's ads for $6.99. And then you have the next tier for $14.99 that's like ads plus.
With more ads?
Yeah.
Or not that you start to get not that you start to get shows or anything at any point.
No.
It's just more ads.
No, it's just more ads. It's called Media Master Plus.
That's pretty good. That's what I feel like half of YouTube is already.
$6.99 for ads. That's
Right.
it. It's a great idea.
Isn't that what YouTube is?
No content.
I mean, YouTube's free, but isn't that what most of YouTube is? Is just sponsored content that
Yeah,
is then layered
basically.
with ads on top
That's
of it?
the whole internet now.
Oh,
Everything's
jeez.
sponsored content.
All right. I think the episode needs to be over. We're getting into old man mode. We're complaining about the internet.
Uh-oh. It's almost midnight. We're turning into pumpkins.
We're turning into the Muppets.
Yeah, whatever their names are.
I used to know their names.
What are their
and I can't.
names? Bonnie and Clyde.
Yep. DB Weiss and
And Fuckboy. Yeah.
Jim
and Bob
Halpert.
Jr. All right. This has been another great episode of Hokey
Statler
Religion.
and Waldorf.
Okay, there you go.
I just had a stroke. Sorry.
You gotta wait longer. You gotta pull a me and wait until I'm
Wait until the
halfway
music is
done.
playing,
Yeah.
and then yell
And
it in
then
the middle
yell
of the
it out.
music. Great.
Remember it way too late.
Right.
This has been another great episode of Hokey Religion.
A fantastic one, even a
Sometimes. Great one.
It happens. You
Sometimes.
can reach us via email at asklobot@hokeyreligion.com. You can find us on Twitter at the new Twitter handle,
Hokey
Hokey Podcast. I also had a mini stroke trying to remember what it was. You can find us mostly anywhere.
Yeah.
Facebook,
Spotify.
Spotify,
Tumblr.
Tumblr. Yep, the
some
episodes
reason.
post to Tumblr in case you need to find them there. And YouTube if you just, you gotta listen through your browser while you're at work and no one's watching. And as always, please go to iTunes and leave us a review if you have not already, because it is helpful and we like them.
Yes.
That's mostly it. Just for us.
We read them.
Yeah. And if you really enjoy the show, you can go to patreon.com/hokey-religion and donate funds to us as little as $1. And you can just do it one time or monthly. Anything helps.
Hey, $1 a month. What are you?
Bastard.
Fucking...
Is that where you were going? No?
Yeah.
Were you going to get that
Pretty
violent?
much.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you, a piece of shit?
What
It's just
you?
$1.
You stupid piece of shit. Give us $1.
We are getting into violent old man mode. We really need to end this episode.
Give us
We're just starting
$1.
to yell at people for no
You
reason.
dumb
We're
fuck.
complaining about the internet.
Give us your stupid $1. Just give it to us.
You
Just
can
stop the excuses. I've had enough of this. Give us your $1. We deserve your $1 at this point. There's 103 fucking episodes of this show. Just give us
Oh,
$1.
no. I've got to get the old man extinguisher and put out Michael.
I can't stop. Somebody help me.
I've got to go get what old men ate tapioca.
Yeah, I was gonna
I've got to
say-
cover him in
I was
tapioca.
gonna say pudding.
I've got a tapioca extinguisher. I start to spray you with. Yeah, it's real. It's very slow. It's like just a
It
chunky,
doesn't come out
a
very
chunky
far.
stream.
You
No.
gotta get real close with it.
All right, that's more than
I'm
enough.
gonna go bathe in pudding. Good night, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Hokey religion is an ancient weapon. Hokey religion is an ancient weapon, so no match for a good blaster at your side.